So welcome everyone, and thank you for joining the Kootenay Conservation Program's first Conservation Ambassador training. This three-part series is a new offering from the Kootenay Conservation Program, and it's great to see so many familiar faces and some new ones here today. My name is Marcy Marr, and I am KCP's Stewardship Coordinator, and I'll be your host today for this training. And Juliette Craig, KCP's Program Manager, is here to assist with technology, hoping everything runs smoothly for us all. And we also have KCP staff, Nicole Trigg and Kendall Benesh here. Given the rich heritage of stewardship in the Kootenay region, I'd like to acknowledge that KCP's work occurs in the traditional territories of the Ktunaxa, Secwepemc, Snakes, and Silks peoples who've lived and stewarded the land and waters in this region for many generations. We're always very, very grateful to the funders and supporters of KCP, without whom we couldn't do these types of programs. And for those of you who are new to the Kootenay Conservation Program, also known as KCP, we're a broad partnership founded in 2002 and currently comprised of more than 80 land and water conservation and stewardship groups, government agencies, resource industries, and agricultural producers working throughout the East and West Kootenays. And one of our mandate is to coordinate and facilitate conservation efforts on private land and to generate the support and resources needed to maintain this effort. And a key aspect of conservation in the Kootenay region is private land stewardship. KCP supports stewardship organizations that conduct landowner outreach by contributing technical and financial capacity, as well as opportunities for better organization, effectiveness, and synergies. These training sessions are born out of our commitment to build stewardship capacity within our region while creating a collaborative community of conservation providers. In 2017, KCP held 2 landowner outreach workshops, one in Cranbrook in the East Kootenay and the other one in Nelson in the West Kootenay, to identify next steps for how stewardship could have greater conservation impact in our region. One of the recommendations was a toolkit that would serve as a one-stop shop for private landowners, local government planners, land managers, and stewardship practitioners to easily find information on organizations and programs throughout the Kootenays. And in 2019, KCP completed the Stewardship Solutions Toolkit, both online and in print, featuring the programs and services that many of you provide. The services are organized by 14 conservation neighborhoods, which when you click on one, you're brought to a page like this one for the Columbia Valley, where there are over 24 different organizations, services, and community monitoring opportunities. And every neighborhood has a list of services appropriate for the area. So using this Stewardship Solutions Toolkit as a basis for Conservation Ambassador training program, we put this together in order to help diversify knowledge within organizations about private land stewardship information that's available in the region. And in the spirit of cross-pollination, the theme of the training session we're starting off with today is Stewarding for Plants and Insect Biodiversity with Valerie, Huff, and Brenda Beckwith. And then next Tuesday, we'll be stewarding for bird nesting and roosting habitat with Janice Arndt and Verena Shaw. And then on June 9th, stewarding for water and wet habitats during climate change with Georgia Pack and Camille LeBlanc. This series of presentations will address such things as why stewarding for plants, pollinators, bird nesting habitat, water and wetlands is important and can provide conservation benefits. What to look for on a property using a helpful search image. Explore conservation starters to open up conversations with a landowner or a manager on a topic, as well as practical things that every landowner should know about stewarding their land and water. Today's agenda will be a presentation that will be about 30 minutes and be followed by Q&A, and then we'll have time in small breakout groups to get to know each other better and deepen your learning. And then we'll reconvene for some closing comments. Okay, so let's begin our presentation. And today our presenters are Valerie Huff, who is a restoration botanist and a familiar face representing the Kootenay Native Plant Society and a director of Native Bee Society of BC. Valerie has been a professional botanist in the West Kootenay for over 25 years, a co-founder of the Kootenay Native Plant Society, and her love of plants and extensive training and knowledge in restoration ecology, plant propagation, and agronomy informs and enlivens both her work and her life. We also have Brenda Beckwith, who is a plant ecologist and ethnobotanist and the principal owner of Kinseed Ecologies. And Brenda has helped help people discover and incorporate native plants into home gardens and restoration sites. And Kinseed Ecologies offers native plant seeds, consulting, and native plant propagation services in the interior of BC. So welcome to you both, and look forward to your presentation, so please share your screen.
Thank you so much, Marcy. Hi, everybody. I'm Brenda. It's such a pleasure to be here and to see so many familiar faces. Hello, everybody. It just seems like, well, we're coming out of winter and perhaps coming out of a pandemic, and perhaps we'll be able to see each other more coming soon. So let's get this show on the road. Hey, oh, hang on a second. I need to, okay, I got that clicked. I remembered, Marcy. Okay, so let's do that. Let's do that. All right. How does that look to everybody? Does that look like you're not quite awake yet and so shot in the pants right there? All right, Marcy, we will do our best to keep it to 30, but I don't know. So this is going to be a lot. Hang with us, folks. I think you'll get this recording later, so you can go back at it at your leisure. So I renamed the title just slightly to Seeing the Meadow Through the Trees. And that will become more self-explanatory as we work our way through. But when we travel, live, spend time, recreate in our region, we're often looking at a landscape like this. And when we think of biological diversity, you know, and our landscape, we think of mountains and water and trees, right? We have abundance of all of that. And so when I then prompt you with thinking about meadows, you might automatically go to the alpine, correct? And so you might come up against something like this beautiful alpine scene. But we're here to talk about low elevation meadows, and there's a lot of them if you know where to look. And so they could be fed by water. They could be dry, really shallow soiled. They could be associated with a major lake or a seepage, right? Or here at Goose Creek, really a combination of many different factors creates a whole series of beautiful pocket meadows. And so these are ecosystems and plant communities that are definitely worth notice and have quite a lot of biological diversity here in our region. And so today we want to cover four main themes, four main topics. We'll start with why are plant-insect interrelationships important. Then we shoot off to meeting with landowners, lighting the spark, practical options, and then we'll end quickly with stewardship solutions.
All right, and thanks to Marcy and Juliet for kind of structuring our presentation for us. So we hope to do you justice. So thank you. So why are plant-insect interrelationships super important? So first of all, this is data from the Conservation Data Center. Plants and insects represent more than half of plants, animals, and fungi in British Columbia. So obviously they're an important part of our biodiversity, and the interrelationships between them are many. So there are, predator-prey relationships. There's a lot of herbivory between plants and insects. But today we want to focus on a particularly important relationship, which has been called an endangered mutualism. And that, of course, is pollination. So we all learned in grade school that pollination happens when pollen is moved from the stigma of one plant to another. And sometimes we enlist the help of animals. Sometimes the plants enlist the help of animals. So British Columbia has a bewildering diversity of plants, more than 2,500 native plants. The diversity of native bees is stunning and beautiful. There's more than 450. Some would say there are more than 460 different species of native bees. And native bees are the most critical pollinators in our ecosystems, but they're not the only pollinators. There's also more than 250 native butterflies and more than 10 times as many moths. So that moths are often overlooked. So there's more than 2,000 moths in British Columbia as well. And then there are other organisms that also help pollinate plants. So wasps, flies, beetles, thrips, and even hummingbirds. But hummingbirds aren't an insect, for those of you who aren't in the know. So this is just kind of a portrait of some of our most beautiful bees, butterflies, and one little pollinating fly. You may have heard about the crisis in pollination and global declines in insects and pollinators. So just some of the obvious reasons why pollinators need conservation. So more than 85% of angiosperms require pollinators, and that includes more than 2/3 of our crop species. The fruits and the seeds that come from insect pollination of plants are a major part of the diets of many, many animals. And the pollinators themselves are a critical part of the diet of many animals, including birds, reptiles, amphibians, and fish. So this is part of this web, the food web that starts with the plants as the primary producers and goes right out to all of the animals in the ecosystem. So we think of pollination as a keystone process in terrestrial ecosystems. So while a lot of us have heard about pollinators at risk, not many of us pay that much attention to plants. And plants need conservation too. And they receive very little attention, protection, and funding. So this is a quote from the States, where, and I think the situation is probably really similar here. Although 50% of the species listed under the Federal Endangered Species Act are plants, less than 5% of funding goes to plants. And I really think that we all need to think a little bit more about plants in our conservation efforts. And this is kind of one of the reasons why I think it's so important to think about plants. And this is the link with the pollinators. So these are co-evolved systems. And this diagram, I get excited by this graph. So this is a global pattern by pollination biologist Jeff Allerton. And it shows that for every plant species you incorporate into a system, you add at least 1 or 2 pollinators to the system. And globally, the loss of plant diversity through land use change is a driver of the loss of pollinator diversity. So if you want to protect pollinators, you have to protect the plants. And plants are one thing that we can actually easily protect. It's a whole lot easier to plant a bunch of native plants than it is to plant a bunch of native pollinators. But more than that, plants are important. Plant diversity is an important component of ecosystems and buffering against climate change. Soil carbon storage increases with plant diversity, and this is particularly true of grassland and meadow type ecosystems. Bacterial and fungal diversity increases with plant diversity. So if there's one thing you can do, it's increase your native plant diversity and you increase the capacity of the system to buffer against climate change. All right, now I'll pass it back to Brenda.
All right, now that we're all on board All right, let's talk about some of the things we can do when we go and meet with landowners. And I've had the great pleasure in both the States and Canada to meet with a lot of people. And so some of the insights. So as an ethnoecologist, I always think about landscape, and this may not be in everybody's toolkit, but I think it's really important. What is the land story? What are the features of the landscape trying to tell me about where it is on its current trajectory? So first and foremost, biodiversity is linked to ecological changes in ecological composition and structure over both space and time. And so I look for those ecological changes when I'm on the landscape. Those can be shaped, characterized, directed by edaphic, environmental, or anthropogenic reasons, all contribute to ecological diversity, and that drives biological diversity. So I think about, I look at hydrology, pollination, connectivity. How has those processes on that landscape changed? Or how do I think they've changed? Are there some that are still intact? Are there some that might likely change in the future, right? With climate change or development pressure close by. Probably higher end questions that maybe you're not, don't really come to mind when you walk onto someone's property, but I think it's worth keeping it kind of in the back of your mind that, this is the higher order considerations that I think we should keep in mind. So what is the current trajectory? Site history is important. We don't give site history enough credit or consideration, I think. We walk onto a site, we see what's there, that's our baseline, but no, that site got to where it is based on its site history. So just as the landscape is trying to tell me something, the owners also tell me something too. Right? What is their story? What is their role? So what I've found that most people don't really know what they have, and forgive me, Erin, but CICUS and other invasive species societies have done a magnificent, successful job at getting their message out, right? And so more often than not, when I walk onto a land, I'm confronted with people who think plants are bad. Right? They're fearful of what I might tell them, when in fact, they do want to conserve the land and do what's right. They just don't lack the environmental literacy to know what to do and make the decisions on their own, but they do want to learn. And that's a good starting point. That's where you light the spark, right? Tap into that desire to know more, right? We need help seeing the opportunities they have on the land. And there often are, right? If you spend time with them on the land, people need encouragement, they need resources, and they need support. The key word in this last sentence is ongoing, and that's what we found through one of our projects that I'll be telling you about momentarily. So walking the land is critical, right? You can't just go up to a site and look at it and go, yep, this and this is all really good. This is what you should do. This is what you should conserve. You don't often know what you have until you walk the land. As I mentioned at the beginning, we have mountains, we have trees. You often don't see those meadows through the trees until you're actually in there. For biodiversity, of course, to me, it comes back to ecology. So I look for those ecological gaps. Where are those microhabitats? There's topographical changes. Anytime you see those changes on the landscape, you are going to have different plant species that benefit different insects and different organisms. So read the plant species. That means that you need to know the plant species. So that's a really good place to start. Right? So read the plant species, they'll tell you a lot about site conditions. If you see something like twin flower out in the middle of a forest or out in the middle of a meadow, right? You know that there's been some land changes that are happening there, right? So you can see the plants. They will definitely, trust me, they've been at it a lot longer than you have. They will tell you a lot about where they like to grow and why perhaps they're growing in the site that they are. And again, back to the landscape context, right? So nothing happens in a vacuum, obviously, right? So what are the neighboring properties doing? How is that affecting the ecological processes on your site, right? What are those ecological inputs? Are there any outputs coming away from that site that should be taken into consideration, right? What are the clues out there to the changes in the land use? So all of that, like I said, edaphic, environmental, anthropogenic, all of those factors can play into the creation of and maintenance of biological diversity. So some people have natural features that lend themselves to ecological diversity. However, there may be, if someone wants to increase biological diversity, they may actually have to change their management systems. And you know, as we found out, you can start off on a small scale and do a lot, and we'll show you that in a minute. So keep scale in mind and mind your step. And so scale is always important. As a landscape ethno-ecologist, I always think about scale in both space and time. And mind your step, that's a little foreshadowing here. So let's talk about scale. So when you walk onto a site, what's your search image, right? You might, if you're lucky enough, you can see something like that, right? That looks pretty spectacular. A whole lot of biological diversity happening there. Some shallow soils, some rock outcrop, punctuated with different, both introduced and native species. Very sort of a classic meadow scene here in the West Kootenay. Now zero in a little bit, right? Not all of us are going to be fortunate enough to have a beautiful rocky outcrop pocket meadow. So look for those ravines, look for the gaps, look for those opportunities, like I said. And so this beautiful silky lupin here on a fairly small landscape surrounded by conifers. So zeroing in terms of scale, right? But even zeroing in even more. So I put this one in because the number of pollinators that need willow are phenomenal, but we don't often consider willow as a wildflower, do we? Right? So, but willows are so important for our pollinators in the early spring and late winter, right? And so thinking about time as well as space is also really important. So know when if you're walking a site in March, you can still be looking for biodiversity and for pollinators specifically, as you would in July or as you would in October, right? So time is important. And keeping your eyes on the ground, minding where you step. 70% of our bees make their homes in the ground. Sorry, we just had to do that. That was a little gratuitous, but anyway, what you got to have a cutie bee. So look at this, like look at all the holes in this picture on the left, right? If you're at Beaver Creek, there's holes all over the place. We're just stamping them, walking on top of them, but we always keep in mind that you need homes for ground nesting bees as well. So don't plant everything. Plant some, don't leave some bare ground. All right, so Al, I know you're here. Hi, Al. So out at Fort Shep, one day, right? So beetles on the shiny leaf meadowsweet, also known as birch leaf spirea, a beautiful swallowtail on an introduced and invasive, and getting more invasive every year, hairy vetch. Ringlet, Janice, I got it. Ringlet on spreading dogbane, and a fly on another introduced plant, cinquefoil, and some beautiful male swallowtails down there puddling. So one day you can see quite a lot of diversity, and it's not all about the native plants and the pollinators. Sometimes the pollinators have used or are using or nectaring on introduced plants, and those are important. So the consideration there is if you're going to replace and introduce perhaps invasive species with a native one, make sure that it is a pollination nectar equivalent. Don't put something in there, then that swallowtail is going to come back and can't use. All right, so I just wanted to quickly go through some examples. So Megan here in Pass Creek and her property and her family's property first came, this is part of the Stewardship Solutions online toolkit, Lower Columbia River region. She, through outreach through the Kootenay Camas Project, part of the Kootenay Native Plant Society, they put a call out to report and monitor camas population. So she contacted Valerie and up we went. Though these pictures were taken just a few days ago. So when you first enter the property, right, you see trees and the neighbor's dog. And so then you go for a walk, and you have beautiful, you're getting into some deciduous forest. It's looking really nice, actually. Some beautiful understory. And then you pop out, right? But you don't see it when you first walk onto the property, but you pop out in beautiful series of pocket meadows. And so the discussion with her was, oh my gosh, you know, you got these beautiful meadows. What can you do to help maintain them? So it's not necessarily about creation, it's about maintenance. And so it is about decommissioning a road, because they had a road going right through part of one of their meadows. Easily enough, decommission a road. The previous homeowner diverted water away from the meadow, so it's drying up. Perhaps that's why we see more death camas than camassia, blue camas at this time. So they are going to bring that water back to that meadow, right? And help that seepage come down and feed that meadow, right? And then there's going to be monitoring and maintenance, and then we're going to help them with conservation measures moving forward. And walking the land with Megan and the kids, this is a picture of the road that was decommissioned several years ago, right? So it can happen, the plants are there, they can respond. So this is the opportunity that, or the project I talked about earlier, Wildflowers for Pollinators, funded by the Kootenay Lake Local Conservation Fund. So Leah actually initially reached out to me at Kenseed, and then because she's located in Shady Bench, we connected her right away with our Wildflowers for Pollinators project through Kootenay Native Plant Society. It's a new build, as you can see, and they have this amazing slope that's just nothing but gravel, sand, open, and something needs to be done. But you can see there's quite a lot of really nice property surrounding the house. And so we started with the solarization process and helped her learn how to collect the seed, which she is an A seed collector. And this is 1 year after, in the meadow making process, 1 year after she's planted with seed, the meadow species. As you can see, there's a ways to go. But when we visited the property last year, pretty much every single flowering plant had some kind of pollinator on it. Pretty cool to see in 1 year. So it can be done pretty quickly. All right, so listen to the landowner, hear their connections to the land, help them make those connections. It will light a spark. Shed a positive light and spur enthusiasm. Not all plants are bad. Turn the issues into biodiversity's opportunities. The opportunities are there. And so I just wanted to, before I send it back to Valerie, I just want to play a little video because Ken needs to share the limelight here. So listen carefully. Yeah, you might need to turn up your volume. And let's give this a try.
So here we are in Ken's Meadow in Crawford Bay. And this is one of the plants that has come up that we sowed last fall. Tell us about your discovery about this plant, Ken.
Well, this silverleaf phacelia, I think, is kind of really cool because it's brought so many bees to the yard, and it's kind of made it fun to see the bees. And like the one time in particular, I didn't know there were any bumblebees in there. I didn't see them, and I was just giving it a little bit of water, and then just this kind of cloud of bees came out, and it's added an extra dimension to me for the flowers overall, and just being able to see the bumblebees kind of enjoying them too. So I kind of like that. It's added a little bit of extra fun having bees around like that.
Thank you, Ken. All right, I don't know if you heard that, but he's talking about the massive bees there. And I think what is amazing about this last shot is that the addition of plants from seed in this meadow has added so many more bees than that hayfield right behind it. right? So now it's time for expansion, and it's just a small plot, but now he can expand, and he's got the plants and the bees to support that expansion, which is really super cool and lots of fun. All right, back to Valerie, I think. Let's see.
All right, so I wanted to talk about some of the things that you can do and how you can look for opportunities to biodiversify. This is our new word that we've coined. So let's all biodiversify. So when we think about biodiversity, we often think of the species of plants and animals, but it's so much more than that. So there's biodiversity in the structure of the land. So look for places where you can add different complex structures to the land. Think about the processes that are happening there, and add complexity. And then with the native plant species, we've talked about that. So add more plants, add more diversity and more plants themselves. And think about the needs of the bees and butterflies in particular. So there are specialist bees that require particular plants. There are other plants that are used by hundreds of bees. So you want to prioritize the plants that you're choosing based on the needs of those. And then butterflies need particular host plants to survive. So let's add in some host plants for butterflies, and particularly our region has quite a few endangered butterflies. So let's pay attention to the host plants for endangered butterflies. And we often think at the species level, but I want to say that all of our genetic diversity, all of our biodiversity is based on genetic diversity. So we need to think about local genetics and prioritizing getting local genetics into our ecosystems and connecting with the ecosystems around us. So this is a little chart. It's like sometimes you don't need to do a lot. There are small things that you can do to add complexity to your system, like adding a tiny little pollinator wildflower meadow in the middle of a hayfield. And, depending on how complex the system is, small steps or large steps. So you can look at opportunities to enhance or even create habitat on your land. So yeah, obviously grow some native plants. So collect your own seed, grow your own plants, convert an old lawn to a meadow, and then share what you're learning with others. Reducing pesticide use is also critically important for pollinators. This is a particularly important for pollinators. So we encourage people to solarize or to sheet mulch their ground to kill off the ground. And so this can take a year or two to reduce the complexity, to reduce the growth, the top growth. And here we are at Bummers Flats levee last fall, where they've been looking at creating pollinator habitat on a levee that they've been spraying regularly for weeds. So here we removed the biomass before we added seed. And finally, ask your nursery if they're using, particularly with neonicotinoids on their plants. So we really need to think about where pesticides are often hidden in our floral diversity. Many commercially produced commercial nurseries use neonics in their plant production. So those can be passed on and are a major threat to pollinators. Okay. I'm a big promoter of the Xerxes Society for Invertebrate Conservation. And depending on what you're looking for, if you're looking for information on pollinators and other insects, they don't just focus on pollinators, but these are some of the really great management tools for management guides for different systems. I wanted to highlight this particular one. This is a habitat assessment guide. This is probably the easiest, most accessible checklist that you can use. So I highly recommend downloading this from the website and using this to guide your property assessment. So this checklist of actions is thorough, it's really clear, and yeah, it looks at all the different opportunities to complexify in landscaping. Okay. So, and also in increasing awareness. So I wanted to highlight the EcoGarden project that we were happy to contribute to. This is a CKIS project available online. I don't know if it's in the Stewardship Solution Series yet, but it should be. And a highlight to all the different partners who contributed to that. And this will help you in selecting plants that are really useful for pollinators. So imagine that Kootenay gardens are 20% native plants or more. And then there's been significant local research by different researchers in the West Kootenay. So I would recommend you getting your hand on some of these if there's particular interest. So Janice, who you'll hear from next week, she's going to talk about birds, but she's also an amazing lepidopteran biologist. And yeah, so there's lots of information out there. Ask us for copies of these if you want them. Okay. And then kind of our other motto, other than Biodiversify, is preparation, patience, persistence. So prepare your land. Preparation is really critically important, and we need to take time and do that. Patience, it always takes more time than you think. And it's also about managing your expectations and landowner expectations. And persistence, it's like, this is not something you can do once. It's not something that you can, you know, it's not a once and done kind of thing. So you have to persist, just like in all conservation. You can't just do something once. So this is a hedgerow that was planted at a friend's property. We planted a friend's property out at 6 Mile. And in the first year, the plantings sleep. In the second year, the plantings creep and start to occupy their space. And in the third year, you see that your plantings leap. So that's how you use patience, persistence, and preparation to establish your conservation efforts. Okay, over to Brenda.
All right, in the last couple of slides here, as we close off, we're doing well, Marcy. Stewardship solutions. So just a few more slides here, and then we'll open it up for questions. I'm sure we've left you with a lot to think about. Just before I get to that, we have incentive for the best. Well, I guess we're going to do random. We wanted to have it the best question, but we are going to give away one of our posters on biodiversity that will be randomly chosen from the people who submitted questions. There we are. Okay, a little promo there. All right, so moving on. So in the online toolkit for stewardship solutions for the Kootenay Lake region, we do have our Wildflowers for Pollinators project. And within that project are links to that poster, in case you don't get it randomly. But also the Kootenay Lake Wildflower Seed Library Collection Manual that we were able to produce with the help of the Idaho Panhandle Bees to Bears Climate Adaptation Initiative. Hats off to them. They're doing amazing work just south of the border, as well as a little video, thank you, Nicole, that was produced last year based on the project with, as you can see, me. So hopefully you can tolerate a little bit more of me and watch that. All right, but it's really kind of neat. As I was sifting through the online toolkit, I was thinking, all right, yeah. So biodiversity, increasing wildflowers and meadows and complexifying, as Val was saying, really could do a lot to reduce invasive species, as we're trying to do with Flinroe and Nature Trust over at Bummers Flat, right? It goes a long way to helping promote and best practices for shoreline or near shore environments. Definitely biodiversity plays a role in the environmental farm plan. The best thing that you can do once you start clearing out some of those trees and to fire smart your land is to plant meadow species. You're opening up light, resources, water, space, right? Get some plants there that are green and wet during the summertime, and you're going to reduce your fire risk. And a hats off to Janice, who you'll hear from next week. Of course, bank swallows, absolutely be a part of their survey. What do they feed on? Flying insects that need wildflowers. And finally, contact information, right, for the Kootenay Native Plant Society. I just want to highlight our current projects, again, our Wildflowers for Pollinators project, as well as our large, just started Pollination Pathway Climate Adaptation Initiative funded by the CBT Ecosystem Enhancement Program. And a lot of the work that we're doing there will inform, there will be outreach, there will be materials produced that will inform your work and help you make really good decisions of what to do and what to recommend on private properties moving forward, keeping climate change in mind, as well as there's some information about Kinseed and the website for the Native Bee Society of British Columbia. And with that, we thank you very much for your time, and we will open it up for questions.
Brenda, thank you so much. And Val too, that was great, really great job. So we've got two ways of doing it. For those who want to type, please put questions in the chat box. And then for other folks, you'll see that there's the reaction little icon there in your toolbar. If you open that up, you'll see that there's a raised hand. So I can call on you that way if you feel better, or more comfortable in verbalizing your questions. But I see a few that are piling up in the chat here. So we'll start with those. Okay, so and Brenda and Val, I'll assume that you guys will tag team on who speaks to this. So so what are the top 3 native plants that we should be planting? Are there a top 3?
There's a top 1. No, there's many. We have in our, for the pollination pathway, our target list is long, is extensive. However, I'll respond with Silverleaf Phacelia histata, our friend and bee expert Lincoln Best. He says if you plant any plant in your garden or on your property, it should be Silverleaf Phacelia. It's his number 1, it's number 2, number 3, number 4, and on and so forth in terms of the top plant to plant. Keep in mind, flowering shrubs are extremely important for pollinators, especially at different seasons of the year. But yeah, there's round leaf alum root is bees in our yard are on the alum root starting now, and they'll be there until October. So what you want is not necessarily the best 3. What you want is the best 3 that will sustain pollinators from March to October. So you need to have overlap of the species that you choose. Okay.
And have any of the projects incorporated a regular fire regime to improve the health of the meadow species in the projects that you've done?
Not yet. We have, as part of a different Kootenay Native Plant Society project called Restoring Camas along the Columbia down on the Oxbow below Selkirk College, we did do prescribed fire treatments, taking after building on my PhD research on the coast. We have yet to use fire. It is something to consider. Of course, fire today, being used today, is tricky for many reasons. With climate change, and of course, we all know about fires and smoke in our region. I think it can be used on a small scale. We really need to figure out what that window looks like in terms of application. And we definitely do. I mean, one of the first mandates is do no harm. And so we do not necessarily want to stimulate invasive species by an application of fire, but it's definitely something I think we're going to consider for Bummers Flat moving forward as an ongoing maintenance tool, but it needs to be tested on a small scale.
Okay, great. Let's see. Can you make a positive impact with a small garden, or even just an outdoor plant, or plant boxes and pots? thinking of people that are in townhouses, apartment spaces, and maybe don't have their own acreage.
Yeah, so absolutely you can. The thing is to consider the floral structure of the plants that you're putting out there. So really yes, you can use planter boxes that have non-native plants, absolutely, because we have bred them to bloom longer, more consistently, but choose plants that have been bred that don't have like double flower structures that the plants get into. Choose plants that are of the color composition that bees like. Choose different depths of plants. So it really is diversify your plantings. And now I'm going to go to the All Ireland Pollinator Project, who actually have a little brochure suggesting on how to do a planter for pollinators. And if you send me an email, I can send you the link to that.
Can you explain a little bit, Val, and for those who don't understand what you meant about the floral structure?
Okay, so flowers come in all kinds of shapes and sizes, as do their pollinators. So bees have short tongues, they have long tongues. Butterflies have really long tongues. Some plants will only feed on really round flowers. Some plants, some pollinators actually need deep tubular plants. So yeah, so when we think of plants, we think of maybe a sunflower. And but there are many different floral structures, and that coevolution is like they've designed each other. So the plant chooses to make its nectar tube just a little bit longer so that the pollinator needs to lengthen its tongue a bit longer, and that drives the ecological diversity.
Okay. Do you sell seeds?
Absolutely, we sell seeds.
Okay, and this is through Kinseed?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so Elodie, if you're interested.
And I also want to note that, yeah, we have packaged seed. We also do custom seed collection, and in the fall, we often do custom seed orders for larger projects. So stay tuned.
Great. Okay, next question. Are you approaching landowners? Does this include municipalities and larger businesses, or are they contacting you? Do you recommend putting out requests and campaign for landowners to ask for your input?
You take it away.
No, I'm having a hard time hearing, so I'm going to go back. And so, are you approaching landowners? Actually, landowners come, they're pretty good at finding us. Actually, or word of mouth. For example, I started working with one landowner on a new build, and they reached out to their neighbor who's also doing a new build, and now I'm doing more work with the neighbor than I'm doing with the original. So I absolutely would love to see a more network approach to what we're doing. I mean, I loved it that Lori from CCAS reached out to us, as well as I see Kate there, Kate with Elkroot, and asked for input with this new EcoGarden project, right? That's where we need to go. We need to provide people with that environmental literacy, right? And actually put forward the resources that we need in our region, and then supply the resources and the ongoing support. And so any ways that KCP and the rest of us can make that happen, I think would be a benefit to all. And if we can link in municipal representatives and other forms of government and other people, First Nations, I think that would be the way that we need to move forward.
The second part of the question, Brenda, was whether you recommend putting out requests or some sort of campaign for landowners to ask for your input. Have you done anything that's like that? That's a more public communication or outreach?
Yeah, so I just want to talk to the issue of capacity and the lack of investment in native plants. We're the Kootenay Native Plant Society completely volunteer-based organization. And yeah, so we are doing whatever we can, but we receive, you know, very little funding, and we have no funding and no capacity really to do this at this point in time. And that can only come with consistent funding. So advocate for native plant conservation. That's my answer.
Yep. And
Okay.
with Kinseed, we're small. We're only in our third year. Largely at this time, our seeds that we do offer to people are all hand collected, very carefully from multiple sites throughout the West and the East Kootenay currently, and we'll be heading up to Columbia Shuswap soon. But it's a lot of time and a lot of commitment to make these seeds and the genetic diversity that we require to do this well here. And so, yeah, it is about capacity at this time. I would love for there to be a campaign, but we really do need to ask ourselves, do we as a group have the capacity to support that campaign when the orders and the asks come in? We don't right now.
Okay. Okay, we've got, there's more questions in the chat box, but we've got time for one more, and then we're going to move on, folks. But there's a question about what would you recommend is the best resource to share with landowners to learn about or identify the native plant species that are on their property? Is there something that's not too complicated, no dichotomous key type of resource that to get folks interested in learning about their plants? Okay, great. Hopefully everybody sees that, the plants of Southern Interior.
So this one is, yeah, it's, you know, by many of us, it's well used, right? We know how diverse our flora is in our region. Not all the plants are in here. Camas is not in here. Milkweed is not in here. However, it's a really nice start, right? And just start. Learn your plants, learn your plant families, more importantly, because that gets you, you know, often 80% of the way there. And so this is a good place to start. Reach out to people, to botanists. You know, again, this is a capacity thing. Don't go nuts, people, but we do enjoy the random, you know, plant question. What is this? Make sure if you send us a photo, make sure it's a good one. All right. You know, not a blurry sort of, but yeah, with consideration, please. Yeah, but I think we will continue. The other thing that on the Wildflowers for Pollinators project website as part of KMPS, and possibly on the Kinseed website, if I have some more time, we're going to start building a database that shows you plants at different times of their growing cycle. So what do they look like when they're seedlings? What do they look like when they're juvenile? What do the flowers look like? What do they look like when they're going to seed? What do those seeds look like, right? So stay tuned. Again, it's about building capacity, and we just need time to do that. But resources are going to be coming.
Oh, that sounds fabulous. So thank you again, you two. We have a little exercise here using Mentimeter that we'd like your participation. So Mentimeter is going to answer like in real time. We're going to end up with some speech bubbles from the input that you all provide. You'll have a few minutes to reflect and type your response, and then we'll have time to watch these responses float by. The question that's going to be in the Mentimeter that Juliet is queuing up, which you can begin to think about while we're getting set up here, is given what you've just learned from Val and Brenda, what could you incorporate into your work? So again, given what you've just learned, what could you incorporate into your work this summer? Something that's short term that you can envision right now taking and thinking, I could do that. Okay, and Juliet, do you want to add the link in the chat? Okay, so Juliet has posted the question in the chat. Oh, some of these are great. Good job, you guys. Really good ideas. Great, so I'll give you another minute or so. And then hopefully if you're done, you are looking at the bubbles floating past to see what other people have identified, and maybe there's some good ideas here for you as well. You don't need to have just one idea. There can be many things to do this summer. Okay, so we're going to move on to breakout groups. And we have pre-assigned you, so many of you who've been on Zoom before know that you will be given some sort of a prompt to join a group. And in those groups, you'll be talking about what you wrote for this first question. So given what you just learned, what could you incorporate into your work? And that's your launching idea for why is it important to be doing this and for your work, and how will you do it? So given what you've just learned, what could you incorporate into your work? And then why is it important and how will you do it? And we have about 20 minutes in the breakout groups, and that should give each of you enough time to cover off these 3 questions. You might want to introduce yourselves first with a little bit of an intro, but then address these 3 questions and just go around your group. And we'll give you a 5-minute warning to let you know when there's 5 minutes to go. And then we'll have a 30-second countdown clock before you're quickly zoomed back into the main session here. So I hope you appreciate your time in the breakout groups, deepen your learning, explore, get to know each other. You all provide stewardship solutions. So this is part of our community building. And we'll see what great ideas you guys come up with after your sessions.
Welcome back. Welcome back from the Twilight Zone. Hopefully you had a great session in your breakout group. You got to know a few people and you shared some ideas. Yeah, and just sort of deepened your learning today. We've got another question here that we would like your response to in the Mentimeter. So if you can go back to that link or on your other device, the code, go back into Mentimeter, you'll see a question that is similar to what you've been discussing based on your discussion or given your discussion. Is there anything you'd like to incorporate into your work? So meaning anything new that you didn't say the first time, anything that came out of your group discussion and your thinking that that you would like to share with others, that you would like to be incorporating into your work. Could be this summer, could be in a longer time frame, but something new. And we'll give you a couple of minutes to respond. Great, and there's some answers that are coming up. So if you're If you're done and you want to see the comments others have made, just go back to the main session and on Zoom, and you'll see the bubbles float by. And for those of you who are still typing, another minute, please. Great, some really good ideas again. Seems like there's been some good learning this morning. Okay, and in the spirit of ending on time for you all, because I know it's a busy day, we just really appreciate your involvement. As I said, this is our first Conservation Ambassador training for KCP, and we hope that it's been a good morning for you as well. And we hope to see many of you next Wednesday when we have the Stewarding for bird nesting and roosting habitat with Janice Arndt and Verena Shaw. And lastly, back in Mentimeter, you'll see that there's some questions here, evaluation, 2 quick questions that'll just help shape our program. And again, thank you all for being here. Have a great Wednesday, and look forward to seeing many of you next week. Oh, and there's things popping up in the chat if you have time to look at the chat, and then there's also some results showing up in Zoom.
Marcy, are you going to cue people when it's time to go, or once they've put
Oh,
in
I
the
just thought
numbers?
people would leave when they needed to leave, but I probably should say to Val and Brenda, thank you again. This was really great, and I'm just sort of mesmerized watching the results as probably all are coming in, but I'm so glad that most people found it very valuable, and I really appreciate the well, your PowerPoint had some really beautiful additions to it that I think will, yeah, visually will be in my mind for a long time. So thank you for the care you took in your presentations and all the information. Gleaned a lot today. So have a great day, everybody. And yeah, sign off when you need to sign off, and we'll see you next week. Bye.